So this particular question comes from the 2016 CCEA SSD A21 paper, question 8, and this normalisation question, similar to the question in the previous paper, involves transforming a data capture form, the fields shown in the data capture form, from a unnormalised form through to a third normal form. And similar to the technique we used in the previous example, again it's a good idea just to identify what fields you're going to store in a database and which fields you aren't going to store in the database, and also to get a sense of what the database is about, and also a sense of what tables potentially you're going to create for this database. And lastly, it's also a good idea just to try and identify a notional primary key, and what is the field around which everything else pivots. So firstly, let's look at the fields, and this is a internal spares order form for Harris Electrical, so it allows customers then to order spare parts. So we've got an order number, order date, then the customer information. You'll notice it's dissimilar to the previous example. We've got multiple address details. Now, as I said in the previous video, we're not going to atomize this data for I guess just to make our fields a bit less numerous. And if you were doing this for real in an actual database, then you would atomize it, and that is the rule. You're supposed to atomize the data. Certainly if you're defining that in an exam questions, you would say atomize the data, but actually we're not going to do that, because it would just increase the number of fields that we're going to have. And that's the same with name as well. So I'm not going to atomize name and address, even though I would have to do that if I was creating a database for real. Then we have stock ID, description, quantity, unit cost, and then we have total, grand total, deposit paid, total due. Now total, grand total, total due are calculated fields or derived fields. And what that means is those fields can be calculated or derived from existing fields within the database, i.e. total can be derived from unit cost and quantity, grand total can be derived from all the totals, and the total due can be derived from the grand total minus the deposit paid. So deposit paid is something you need to record, and that is not a calculated field. And in terms of a notional primary key, I think it's fairly obvious in this case that order number is the most important field within this database, if you like, and everything is bound by the order number. Everything will link to the order number. So in terms of transferring this information into unnormalised form, we simply put all the fields that we're going to record into a table, into an order table, and you'll see that I've also transferred simply for explanation purposes the data from the data capture form into this spreadsheet as well. And the reason for that is because that will help us then when we come to identify repeating attributes, what the repeating attributes are. So in unnormalised form, I'm supposed to list all the fields that I need to store in the database and then atomize the data. So I've listed all the fields I need to store, leaving out those fields that are derived or calculated, and I'm not atomizing the data. Okay, that is something you would put in your definition in the exam, but we're not going to do this here because it'll just make it a bit more painful just to transfer the fields into a new table. So that's me finished with unnormalised form. So I can close the door on unnormalised form. The first normal form is removing repeating attributes, and repeating attributes can be identified by simply looking at which attributes are there multiple records for the one instance of the notional primary key. So if we look here, everything revolves around this order number. So all the order details will stay the same for each part that particular order number contains. So you'll see that the order details all stay the same, but these details here change. So in other words, these are the repeating attributes. These are the fields that there is potential for there to be multiple items for. So we need to remove those to a new table. Along with a copy of the field that they are linked to. In this case, order number. And the reason we do that is to maintain the link between the order and the items that have been purchased. So if I remove those fields and I just delete this information, and you'll see now I have two tables, order and order stock. Now, the last stage, before I close the door in first normal form, I need to assign the keys. So if I look at this table, which field in this table will uniquely identify each record? In other words, if I type in some data into to search for an item, which one will guarantee me only one record potentially will be returned each time? And I can say order number. If I type in order number OR899, that should just return one record. It should just return one instance of that particular order. Order stock, however, you might have potentially several rows or records. If I were to type in order OR899, that will potentially repeat several times because we might have several items of stock that have been purchased in that order. Similarly, if I use stock ID might repeat several times because it might be purchased in several different orders. However, and unlike the last question, we have a quantity field in here, and that quantity field would allow us to buy multiple items of the one item of stock. So we know that in any one particular order, the stock ID will only appear once, and if there is more than one item purchased, then there'll simply be more than one item in the quantity. So with that assumption, or not assumption, with that deduction, then I can safely say that order number and stock ID are my primary key fields, the combination of which will always guarantee that, as long as they exist, of course, that I will at most get one record returned if I were to search for a particular order number with a particular stock ID, as long as that particular stock ID has been purchased in that particular order number. Last thing I need to do is, remember, when you're assigning a keys, you have to assign the primary and foreign key. So order number is now a foreign key in this table because all the order details are in this table. It's on the one side of the relationship, and order number in this table becomes a foreign key. It's in a table to which it doesn't belong. I've taken a copy of it with me. It normally resides in the order table. I've taken a copy of it with me into order stock, and therefore it becomes a foreign key. I can now leave first normal form. I can close the door on first normal form. At the start of second normal form, I have my two tables. In second normal form, I remove partial key dependencies. Partial key dependencies are non-key fields which are related to a subset of the primary key. Non-key fields which have a closer relationship to one attribute of a composite key. By definition, then, tables with only a single field primary key are already in second normal form, so I can ignore that table. This table has a composite key, therefore it might have a partial key dependencies, no guarantees. And if I look at this table, I see stock ID, description, quantity, and unit cost. So what partial key dependencies are there? Well, description will follow stock ID. Description is linked, intrinsically linked to stock ID. Is quantity linked to stock ID? No, it's not. It's only linked to stock ID through the order number because it's the quantity purchased, not the quantity in stock. The unit cost is intrinsically linked to the stock ID as well, because that's what the item costs. So in other words, I have 3 items that will be removed to a new table. And I leave a copy behind of the stock ID to maintain the link between the tables. Now I'm just noticing that I have not put in the deposit field, and I will leave deposit is linked to the order, and it should stay with the order. So it does not, it's not a repeating attribute. It follows the order. It doesn't change with the order. It's the same for each stock item. If we were filling in a table, it would be the same number on each row. The deposit will stay in the order table. So before I leave second normal form, I need to assign the keys. So this particular table stays the same. This particular table, well, the only thing that's changed is that I've removed fields from it. So stock ID, is it still a primary key? Yes, it is. But now it's a foreign key as well, because I've now created a new table, a stock table, which only stores information about the stock. So that will be on the one side of the relationship. So one item of stock will only appear once in this table, but might appear many times in many different orders in this table. So on the many side of the relationship, it's always a foreign key. So we denote it as a foreign key. In the stock table, stock ID will be a primary key field, and therefore, because one item, if you search for any particular stock item, it should only return one row, because no two stock items will have exactly the same stock ID. So I can now close the door on second normal form, and at the start of third normal form, I have 3 tables. Third normal form is about removing transitive dependencies. Transitive dependencies are non-key fields which are closely linked or intrinsically linked or fully functionally dependent upon other non-key fields. So what does that mean? It means that fields that are linked and change with other fields that are not necessarily related to the primary key. So there's really only 2 potential tables that this can occur in. That's stock and order, simply because both of those tables have several non-key fields, whereas order stock only has 1 non-key field, and therefore it can't be related to other non-key fields because there is only 1. So that is in third normal form. So this table has details about the order and the customer. And clearly you can see then that potentially there is transitive dependencies in here. And so it would turn out telephone number, address, customer name are all fully functionally dependent upon customer number and have an integral relationship with the customer number, are fully functionally dependent upon the customer number, and therefore those need to come out to a new table, leaving behind a copy of the field that they're fully functionally dependent upon, which is customer number. And then we have a customer table, and before we leave third normal form, we have to assign the primary keys. And by assign the primary keys, I mean both the primary and the foreign keys. So if we look at the order table then, so order number is still the primary key. Customer number now becomes a foreign key because it's going to be on the many side of the relationship, because a customer might have many orders, and they might appear many times in this table, and therefore they're on the foreign side of the relationship. On the many side of the relationship, the customer number should only appear, any one particular customer should only appear once in this table, and therefore that customer ID you would expect to only appear once and to be unique, and therefore it should be the primary key in this table. All the other 2 tables aren't affected, so their primary keys and foreign keys stay the same.